On the planet Vale, every child grows up knowing the Elder's law. No alien may speak with a human. No alien may touch a human. No alien may even acknowledge a human's existence. Stories about Earth are whispered in the darkest corners, filled with warnings and fear. Vale has known centuries of peace, harmony so strict it stifles, overseen by the unbending will of its ancient rulers. Curiosity is discouraged, tradition revered. Every question about the stars is met with silence. Lyra never fit comfortably into this world of rules and rituals. Her teachers called her restless, her mother worried, her peers reckless. She trained as a warrior, dreaming of challenges that never came. Her life was a long march in neat formation, all color and possibility pressed flat beneath the Elder's doctrine. She watched birds migrate overhead and wondered about worlds beyond the invisible fences drawn across Vale's sky. One dusk, the silence shattered. A distant roar trembled through the air, setting the flock to flight. Smoke curled in the twilight, black and alien, an ugly wound on the horizon. Lyra froze, pulse pounding. Her village elders gathered instantly, faces grave. Nothing good ever came from the stars. No one spoke it aloud, but every mind leapt to the same conclusion: a human ship. The law was clear: ignore, report, destroy. Nothing else. But when Lyra caught sight of the burning wreckage in the wilds beyond her home, something ancient and irrational pulled at her. Fear warred with fascination. She slipped away from the gathered crowd, her absence masked by chaos and smoke. She told herself she was only looking, just for a moment, that it was curiosity, not treason, guiding her steps through the shadowed woods. She found the human by accident. A blood trail, half covered by broken leaves and dirt, led her to a battered figure slumped at the base of a fallen tree. The human's uniform was torn, one arm twisted at a painful angle. Blood soaked the ground. He looked so fragile, so painfully mortal, not the monstrous figure conjured by legend. When he stirred, his eyes met hers, glassy, fever-bright, defiant even in agony. He tried to speak, words thick and slurred. Lyra could make out only one: help. For a long moment, Lyra simply stared. The law said to leave him. Logic screamed to run. But a memory surfaced: her mother, tending a wounded animal, whispering that life, all life, deserved mercy. She reached for the human, hands trembling, heart pounding. She could not let him die. It was treason. She knew it. Every step back toward her village was measured, cautious, her senses sharpened for the snap of a twig, the glint of a patrol's armor. She stole medicine and a blanket, just enough to keep the human alive. She returned before dawn, silent as a shadow, and worked in darkness to clean his wounds and stabilize his breathing. He drifted in and out of consciousness, delirious and mumbling in a strange tongue. Lyra watched him with growing awe. How could a creature from the fabled death world survive such injuries? His will to live bordered on madness. More than once she considered abandoning him, leaving fate to decide. But each time she turned away, guilt followed, heavier than the threat of exile. The days blurred together. Lyra tended his wounds, brought water and meager food, always watching for signs that she had been discovered. Patrols grew more frequent, combing the woods with harsh voices and sharper eyes. She hid the human in a shallow cave, covering the entrance with branches and brush. He regained strength slowly, confusion giving way to awareness. He asked questions in broken words, eyes burning with curiosity despite pain. As she nursed him, Lyra's fear transformed. The stories painted humans as monsters, bringers of ruin and chaos, but this human was just a man, vulnerable, determined, fiercely alive. He never begged, never complained, only gritted his teeth and worked to survive. She watched him tinker with the shattered remains of a device, fingers nimble even when bloodied. He tore cloth for bandages, shaped a splint from broken wood. Where Valians would rest, he pushed on. Where they would despair, he adapted. Word of the crash spread. The elders sent warnings through the village: do not approach, do not assist, do not ask questions. Lyra's heart thudded with dread each time she heard them. If they found her, there would be no mercy, only exile, shame, erasure from history. Yet she persisted, compelled by something older than law. With every risk she took, her resolve deepened. She began to wonder if the stories were not warnings, but cages, meant to keep Valians small and silent. Lyra's dreams grew wild. She imagined other worlds, imagined standing beside this human on a ship that soared beyond Vale's stifling traditions. The possibility seemed both terrifying and exhilarating. She knew she was changing, becoming something the elders would not recognize. By the end of the first week, she had made her choice. She would see this through, whatever it cost. The human's life now depended on her, and for the first time, she felt alive, no longer just another obedient face in the crowd, but someone with the power to shape her own story. As elder patrols drew closer, Lyra swore a silent oath. She would protect this man from her own people, from the law, even from herself. In the shadows of a world ruled by fear, a spark had been lit. Every day afterward was a lesson in danger. With each visit to the cave, Lyra's heart hammered harder. Each time she slipped through the village, she felt the burn of suspicion, the weight of invisible eyes. She rationed food from her own plate, watered down her soups so she could carry more for the human. The cost was exhaustion, but the reward was seeing the spark of strength return to his eyes. Eli, as he called himself, spoke little at first. His injuries made every movement a struggle. Still, he worked, never idle. He scavenged from the wreckage, fashioning crude tools and collecting anything remotely useful. His will to survive was relentless, almost frightening, but Lyra began to understand. Humans were shaped by hardship, not comfort. When Eli found enough parts to attempt repairs on his communicator, Lyra watched as he coaxed broken wires and shattered circuits with careful, desperate hope. He muttered under his breath, sometimes cursing, sometimes reciting numbers and frequencies. She didn't understand the language, but she understood determination. He was not trying to escape alone. He asked about the local terrain, about patrol routes, about what would happen if someone like him was found. Each question was measured, every answer weighed for risk. Their conversations grew in depth and complexity as Eli's health returned. Lyra told him about Vale, the rigid hierarchy, the laws, the sense of suffocation that pressed down on every young mind. Eli responded with stories of his own, stories of places where cold winds bit to the bone, where seas swallowed entire ships, where people survived not because the world was kind, but because they refused to give up. Lyra listened with wonder and doubt. Eli's world sounded harsh, but it also sounded free. The bond between them grew in silence as much as in words. Lyra noticed the difference in the way Eli moved, how he scanned the sky with an anxious, calculating gaze, how he always chose the hardest, safest ground to step on. He was not reckless. He was prepared for the worst. Once she asked him directly, why keep fighting when all odds were against him? He smiled, a cracked and weary thing, and said, "It's what we do. We survive, no matter what." Late one evening, Lyra stole away to the village archives seeking answers to questions that gnawed at her. She found a sealed codex, a record from generations ago. It revealed that humans had visited Vale long before the law. Back then, the world was not so silent. Ideas and inventions flourished, and the young dreamed of the stars. But contact with humans brought disruption, questioning, rebellion. The elders, fearing chaos, locked away all records and outlawed even the memory of humanity. Lyra's hands shook as she read the last entry. "It is not violence we fear. It is the fire they light in our children's hearts." Understanding landed hard. The law was never just about safety. It was about control. The elders knew what contact with humans could do. The real fear was not war, but inspiration. Back in the cave, Eli noticed the change in Lyra's eyes. He waited quietly, understanding more than she could say. She asked him why his people were called Deathworlders. He explained in simple terms. Earth was a world of extremes, of constant struggle. Every species had to adapt, fight, endure. Humans learned to face adversity head-on, sometimes foolishly, sometimes bravely, but always together. Survival was not just instinct, it was culture. Lyra realized that the law, for all its pretense of wisdom, was built on fear of difference, of challenge, of losing power. She found herself torn between the life she knew and the possibility Eli represented. The danger around them increased. Another young trainee began to track Lyra's movements, curiosity edged with suspicion. Patrols grew more aggressive, probing the forest and questioning villagers. Each day, Lyra's choices became more precarious. Still, she refused to abandon Eli. She brought new supplies, extra bandages, more water, risking everything for a life that was supposed to mean nothing. As Eli's communicator crackled with intermittent signals, Lyra asked herself if she could ever return to the old ways. She realized she could not. Eli's presence had changed her. The world outside the cave was still ruled by the elders, but inside, something new had taken root, a partnership, a fragile hope that defied centuries of silence. Lyra began to dream not just of escape, but of change. She imagined what would happen if others knew the truth, that the law was a prison, not protection, that humans were not monsters, but reminders of what Vale had once been, bold, curious, alive. One night, as the sky flickered with distant lightning, Eli spoke of leaving. The communicator might work for a single distress call, but someone would have to help him reach the high ridge beyond the forest. Lyra knew what it meant: exposure, pursuit, perhaps discovery. She made her decision. She would help, whatever the risk. In Eli's struggle, she had found her own reason to fight. For the first time, Lyra confessed her fear, not of exile, but of a future unchanged. Eli took her hand, squeezing gently, and promised she would not face it alone. In that moment, defiance became a shared promise. Lyra's life was no longer just about survival. It was about breaking the silence. Their plan set, their trust sealed by necessity and by choice, Lyra braced herself for whatever would come next. In saving Eli, she realized she was saving herself, and perhaps a spark of hope for all of Vale. The fragile balance shattered sooner than Lyra expected. Suspicion had been growing like a storm cloud, and when her rival finally pieced together her absences and secretive glances, it was over. She was caught returning from the forest at dawn, mud on her boots and fear in her eyes. Within hours, the alarm spread. The elders summoned the council, and Lyra, still dazed with disbelief, was dragged before them. There was no trial in the sense of justice. The accusations rained down: conspiracy, treason, blasphemy against the law. The truth, spoken aloud, sounded simple: she had helped a human survive. The law was not interested in her reasons. Her words, her protests, her desperate explanations were drowned beneath a flood of condemnation. The elders declared her fate without hesitation. She was to be exiled beyond the Great Ridge, left to wander alone among the wilds and predators, her name erased from all records. It was not mercy. It was a warning to all who might dream as she did. Eli, dragged from his cave and barely able to stand, was to be deported on the first available shuttle, if he survived his injuries that long. The elders refused to meet his eyes, treating him as an object, a dangerous contaminant. The crowd watched in uneasy silence. Some looked away, afraid to be tainted by even a glance. Others, younger and less certain, watched Lyra with something like pity, or longing for her courage. The sentence was carried out with cold efficiency. Lyra was bound and marched through the village, past friends who would not meet her eyes, past the homes that had once been hers. The shame was meant to be total, the isolation complete. Elder guards escorted her to the edge of the wastes, their grip unyielding on her arms. Eli followed, half dragged, half carrying himself, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him collapse. But the law had underestimated both of them. As Lyra stumbled on the threshold of exile, Eli made his move. With the last of his strength, he hurled himself at the guards, a guttural sound tearing from his throat. In the confusion, Lyra twisted free. Eli used the broken communicator as a blinding flash, overloading it with a surge of energy. The sudden burst of light and static startled everyone, giving them precious seconds. It was barely enough. Lyra and Eli bolted into the undergrowth, hearts pounding, lungs burning. The guards hesitated, confused by the audacity of the escape. Few had ever witnessed open defiance. For all their training, the Elders' enforcers were unprepared for the chaos that erupted in that moment. Lyra and Eli moved with desperate speed, relying on instinct and luck. Word of the escape spread faster than fire. The patrols fanned out, the Elders furious and humiliated. But not everyone in the village turned away. Quiet hands left food where the fugitives might find it. A trail of coded signals, simple marks in the trees, guided them through hidden paths. The young, restless, and hopeful began to whisper to each other. Some sabotaged patrol routes, others spread rumors to confuse the searchers. As they ran, Lyra's fear transformed again, this time into something sharp and unbreakable. She knew what waited if they were caught, worse than exile, worse than death. But she also knew that the law was crumbling at the edges. Every act of kindness from a stranger, every secret aid, chipped away at the Elders' authority. Eli's condition worsened with every mile, but he refused to stop. Lyra half-carried him, drawing on strength she didn't know she possessed. Together, they reached the ancient ruins near the world's edge, a place shunned by all for its history of rebellion and loss. There, the two fugitives found not just shelter, but the beginnings of a movement. Others joined them, quietly at first, a few former classmates, a young healer, a boy who'd grown up listening to forbidden stories. These were the outcasts, the dreamers, the ones the law had never truly tamed. They came bringing supplies, news, and most importantly, hope. Lyra saw in their eyes what she had found in herself, the courage to refuse silence. In the ruins, Lyra and Eli planned. They patched wounds, shared what little they had, and plotted not just to survive, but to fight back. The Elders sent a final warning, broadcasting threats and promises of mercy to those who would surrender. The message only steeled the rebels' resolve. Through hardship, betrayal, and exhaustion, a new spirit emerged, a sense that the law, no matter how ancient or absolute, could not smother every spark of defiance. Lyra no longer felt alone. The shame that had clung to her like a second skin was replaced by belonging, forged in adversity and trust. By the time the Elders realized what was happening, the change had already begun. The young were questioning openly. The old whispered about the past, recalling a time when the stars were not forbidden. Lyra's name, once meant to be erased, was spoken in secret with reverence and hope. The flight from exile became the rallying point for something far greater, a quiet uprising that would shake the roots of Vale. And at its heart, a human who refused to surrender, and a Valian who chose courage over fear, stood together on the threshold of the unknown, ready to challenge the world that had cast them out. What started as whispers soon became a current no decree could hold back. News of Lyra and Eli's escape spread in hushed conversations, smuggled messages, and subtle acts of rebellion. The story changed with every telling, growing larger and brighter than either of them imagined. Children repeated it in secret, daring each other to imagine a world without the Elders' law. Young adults, tired of obedience, began to meet after dusk, discussing possibilities that once seemed dangerous, now felt necessary. The Elders tried to stamp out this fire. They doubled patrols and silenced anyone who dared speak Lyra's name, but the harder they pushed, the more cracks appeared in their rule. Guards began to question their orders, finding it harder to turn away from suffering, harder to see Lyra and Eli as threats rather than reminders of what their world had lost. Some guards even deserted, quietly joining the rebels in the old ruins, risking everything for the hope of change. Lyra and Eli found themselves at the center of a gathering storm. Every day, more people arrived, some carrying food, others bringing skills, all bearing stories of quiet defiance. There was fear, but also hope, the sense that they stood on the edge of something irreversible. Eli, his wounds slowly healing, helped organize those who gathered, using his experience to teach them not how to fight, but how to endure and adapt. Lyra became a symbol, not of lawlessness, but of courage, of the strength to challenge what had always been accepted. The Elders' final attempt to reassert control came swiftly. Their followers surrounded the ruins, armed with proclamations and promises of forgiveness in exchange for surrender. Lyra refused. Instead, she broadcast the ancient codex for all of Vale to hear. The true history could not be hidden any longer. The message was clear: fear had been used as a tool, but knowledge and curiosity could not be silenced forever. The broadcast found a ready audience. For the first time in generations, citizens questioned not just the law, but the right of anyone to keep them from the stars. As Lyra's voice reached villages across Vale, the world shifted. The young rose up, standing shoulder to shoulder with the old, who remembered the days before isolation. The elders demanded obedience, but those demands rang hollow. Authority that relied on fear lost its power when faced with a people unafraid. The confrontation ended not in blood, but in unity. Guards laid down their arms. Those who had enforced the law turned away from their posts and joined the crowds gathering around the ruins. No one wanted to be the last to defend the silence. The elders, seeing their rule evaporate, tried to appeal to tradition and stability. Their voices trembled, stripped of certainty. No one listened. When the sun rose over Vale, a new world emerged. The law was rewritten, no longer a tool of control, but a promise of freedom and shared responsibility. Lyra was recognized not as an outcast, but as a leader who had dared to care when all others looked away. Eli, the so-called Deathworlder, became a living legend, proof that even the most feared outsider could bring hope and renewal. In the weeks that followed, Vale opened cautious lines of communication with humanity. Where once there had been silence, now there was curiosity, dialogue, and the first fragile attempts at friendship. Lyra and Eli, their bond forged in risk and rebellion, became ambassadors of this new era. They shared what they had learned, that survival was not enough. Only by questioning, by dreaming, by defying fear, could a world truly grow. Their story passed from voice to voice, carried far beyond the ruins, inspiring not just those who followed, but those who would come after. Lyra and Eli prepared to journey together, not to escape, but to explore, to help heal the wounds of old laws and old fears. As Vale's people gathered beneath unfamiliar stars, the final lesson remained: what the elders had feared most was not violence, but the unstoppable fire of hope, the will to imagine a life beyond obedience. From one forbidden rescue, a revolution began. And in that revolution, humanity's greatest gift proved not to be survival, but the courage to change a world.